Good evening, everybody. MG here, MGCovers, bringing you a brand new handicapping video titled How to Profit from Recent Performance in Sports Betting, which most people know this term as form. Let's get started. Okay, I'm going to read you a line that I often use, and those of you that follow me have heard me use this before. The best indicator of future performance is most recent performance. And again, the sports betting term that is used, it's called form. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example of something that's not related to sports betting, and so that you can understand it and then apply that concept to what I'm going to teach you today. And again, my background, some of you don't know this, but I actually have a degree in education. And what you do is when you're teaching somebody new, you take something that they know, and then you take that information they know and you relate it to something, the information they know, and then relate it to the new information, and it sort of ties it together. So I'm going to give you an example. We all know Urban Meyer, very successful college football coach. Some of you may not remember, Urban Meyer was at Utah before he was at Florida, almost won a national championship at Utah. So if he was very successful at Utah, almost won a national championship at Utah, what would you project him to do at his next coaching job? Would be to duplicate what he did at Utah. And in fact, he did even better than that. He won 2 national championships when he was at Florida. Okay, retires, and then he becomes the head coach at Ohio State. I was one of the first people to jump on Twitter and say this. Immediately when he was hired at Ohio State, I said Urban Meyer will win a national championship at Ohio State. And what did he do? He won a national championship at Ohio State. So that same concept you can apply to sports betting, and I'm going to give you a lot of different examples. And again, what the general public will do is they will look at things like year-to-date record, year-to-date stats, whereas a professional sports bettor, I'm looking at most recent performance in my stat model and also when I handicap situationally. And let me give you some examples. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is talk about the number of games used for stat model for each sport. Again, I do not use year-to-date stats. Most people that are amateurs in sports betting, that's what they do. They look at a team, this team's 9-2, even though they might have lost the last 2 games. So what I do for NFL, I use the last 5 games. So currently NFL this is week 8, I believe, for NFL, but I only use stats from the last 5 games. Again, going back to the premise of most recent performance gives us the best predictor of future performance. NHL, I use the last 10 games. MLB, I use the last 10 games. The reason for that in NHL and MLB, that gives us about a 30-day window of how that team's performing. Same deal in NFL. After 5 games, that's about a month's worth of game. It's about a month's worth, whereas NHL 10 games generally will cover, almost a month. NCAA basketball, we use the last 5 games, and soccer, I use the last 5 games. So that's related to the stat model. And before I give you some specific examples, don't forget, if you want to subscribe to my service, it's basically set up monthly. You can subscribe to our coaching. It's $29.95. You get power rankings, and what you're able to do is you can create lines for all sports. That includes MLB, NFL, soccer, NHL, and NCAA basketball. We also have how to handicap videos posted under our coaching section. You're going to get access to new premium video content. We'll upload that weekly, and you also get unlimited email support. And then also, if you just wanted picks, you say I just want plays, you can get that for $49.95 a month. And we also have a special for 6 months. That is $199 for 6 months. All plays, all sports. You get coaching, power rankings, everything on the site for $199 for 6 months, which is the best deal. It's a savings of about $100 on that one. So, all right, so let's look at a soccer example, number 1. All right. I always have problems pronouncing this soccer team. Schalke. All right, Schalke if you look here, if you look at the first 3 games, starting with September 15th, they won that game 5-1. September 20th, they won 2-1, and then September 28th, they won 3-1. Okay. Now, look what happens on October the 5th. They have a draw. Okay. Then, if you notice, there's a week there they were off for international break, and then when they came back October the 20th, 2 weeks later, they lost to Hoffenheim. Okay, so now we're going to talk about recent performance. Again, we use the last 5 games in soccer. However, we can look even further into those 5 games. So if you look at the within those 5 games, if we go back to the September 15th, those 3 games they won. But the most recent games, they scored 1 goal on October 5th, and then on October 20th, they scored 0 goals. So if, just hypothetically, just to show you how this concept would work, even if you didn't know anything about soccer, and this was all you had to handicap, and we're making a prediction on what's going to happen in their next game, based on the information we have, we wouldn't say they were going to win, right? Because the last 2 games, they've either lost or drawn, right? So that would be our prediction. So we could take winning out of the equation. In soccer, there's 3 scenarios: win, lose, or draw. So we could take the win out there, and probably, since they are a decent team, we would probably say they would draw the game. And sure enough, that's what they did. And what's interesting, too, when you look up here, they scored back September 15th, they were scoring goals 5, 2, and 3. And then starting October 5th, they scored 1 goal, 0, and 0. So recent performance is so, so important. And it's one of what I call secrets in sports betting, but not a lot of people really process it or think about it this way. Okay, let's look at another example. If you look at Augsburg, back September the 14th, they beat Frankfurt 2-1. And then September 28th, they had a draw, and then they lost on September 28th. They lost again on October 6th. They had a break, came back, and had a draw on October 19th. So if we're predicting, again, just using the information we have here, and we were trying to process and predict what would happen in the next game, we could totally take winning out of the equation, right? So it's either going to be a loss or a draw, probably depending on the opponent. And sure enough, that's what happened on October 27th. They actually had a draw. So it seems so elementary and so simple, but it's so overlooked in sports betting. And you can use this concept for anything. Just another example that I'm not going to show you, but I'll talk about briefly, is MLB, is Major League Baseball. When I'm handicapping baseball, when I'm looking at a pitcher, I only use stats for his last 3 starts. That's it. Because that's going to tell you in those last 3 starts how he's going to perform in that 4th game. You know, sometimes he may be a really good pitcher with a good year-to-date record, but in those last 3 games he struggled. So if we were making a prediction of what's going to happen in that next game, we would say, and if he's 0-3 and struggling, we would predict he's probably going to struggle in this game. Okay, let's look at NHL. Now, this was the Washington Capitals. This game actually went down tonight. All right, so even though I use stats from the last 10 games in hockey, we look at the last 5 games to assess form. And another word that those of you that followed me last year and have seen videos on NHL, I also refer to this as confidence. I'm going to give you an example. In sports betting, just think about your own sports betting career, whether you're a novice, you're decent, or you're a professional. If you go 0-5 in a day, you're going to lose a lot of confidence. You're going to have to work on getting your confidence up for the next day. Conversely, if you go, say, 4-1, that next day you're going to have tons of confidence, and it would probably help your handicapping that next day. Whereas if you went 0-5 and you're handicapping the next day, you start to question things. You just have a lot of cobwebs in your head that's going to distort your thinking and hurt your handicapping. The same thing happens in sports. A team that's winning They have a lot of confidence. They're playing freely, whereas a team that's losing just don't have a lot of confidence. In this example, Washington, if you go back to October 18th, they won 5-2. Then 2 days later, 5-3. Won October 22nd, 5-3. And these were all on the road, these last 4 games. Lost to Edmonton, but it was an overtime, so it was a close game. Then finally won that last road game at Vancouver, 6-5 in a shootout. So they won 4 of their last 5, playing with a ton of confidence. If you didn't know anything about hockey, anything about the teams, just based on the concept I'm teaching you right now, and you're predicting what's going to happen in the next game, based on this, just the information we have here, we would predict that they would win the game because they won the last 4 out of 5 games. It's exactly what they did. You can see here they beat Toronto in overtime again on the road, won that one 4-3. Okay, a second NHL example. All right, this is a full 10 games. And if you look down the very bottom, this is actually the last 10 games Edmonton played prior to going into tonight's game. October the 8th, played the Islanders, won that game. Won the next one, beat the Rangers, lost to Chicago. Came back and had a big convincing win over Philadelphia. And then the next game 2 days later beat Detroit 2-1. So if you look there, that little run there, they won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they were 5-1, right? Okay, now look what happens on October the 20th. They lose to Winnipeg on the road 0-1 in a shootout. Okay? And October the 22nd at Minnesota, they lose 0-3. Okay, now let's just look at the last 3 games and see if we can recognize a trend. Starting with the game they won against Detroit. They scored 2 goals against Detroit. Winnipeg, 0 goals. October 22nd, 0 goals. So even if you don't know anything about NHL or anything about Edmonton, you have no other stats to go by other than what you see here, you can make the assumption something is happening to this team offensively. For whatever reason, they are struggling to score goals. Okay, moving along, October 24th, they did get a win, but they had to go to overtime against Washington, and then 3 days later, they get blown out going against Florida at home 2-6. So, again, what I've talked about previously, we look at the last 5 games to assess form. So you're looking at this is a big difference, these last 5 games, when you're looking at the previous 5 games, right? So, and from October 18th to October 27th, they're actually 2-3, or I'm sorry, 2-5. No, my bad. I'm sorry, y'all. So they've won, this is a better way to say it, they've only won 2 of their last 5 games. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's definitely a lot different than the previous 5 games. So again, if this is all the stats we had, this is all the information that you have in order to make a prediction on the next game, what would we predict? Based on that, they've only won 2 of the last 5. We would predict a loss. And that's exactly what happened. And notice the game they lost to Detroit. I actually played Edmonton. I thought there's another sports betting term, what we call regression to the mean. I thought Edmonton would play well because Detroit was one of the worst teams in the NHL right now. They have terrible goaltending, can't score, can't play defense. So I actually played Edmonton and lost. But still, using this to make a point, if you look the number of goals they scored 1 goal. And if you back up that game against Florida, 2 goals, scored 3 against Washington, 0 against Minnesota, 0 against Winnipeg, 2 against Detroit. So they're definitely struggling offensively. But again, hopefully this helps you fully understand about recent performance. And again, you'll hear it often referred to, and especially soccer, you'll hear it. A lot of websites show, they'll say, hey, here's the team's form for 5 games, the last 5 games, the last 6 games. But you can apply it to anything. You can apply it to goaltending. I do the same when I'm handicapping NHL. You can apply it to any sport. You can look at NFL's, you can look how quarterbacks played in the last 3 games as opposed to the previous. So if you look at his whole year-to-date stats, instead of doing that, look at his last 3 games. Is he playing average? Is he playing above average, or is he playing below average? So it can kind of give you some insight into, using the most recent stats to predict his performance for the next game. So anyway, hopefully that video gave you some insight. Hopefully it makes you a better handicapper. If you like this video, please click the like button, subscribe. Follow me on Instagram. I give out a ton of content on Instagram on my storyline, constantly posting tips, different things that I see. You can follow me on Twitter as well. It's MGCovers, covers spelled with a Z. Hope everybody has a profitable week, and don't forget to incorporate recent performance into your handicapping. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.